Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't beat that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
How we doing, analysts? Jason Elder here with another LEA podcast deep dive. Research Remix with Jamie Roush, the show that talks about research and how it applies to law enforcement analysis. And with me, as always, is Jamie Roush. Jamie, how we doing?
Doing great, Jason. Thanks so much for having me again today.
All right, so this is our third episode, and we decided to bring in a special guest. Our special guest is Dr. Nusret Sahin, who started his career with the Turkish police as an officer, moved to the United States and got into academia. He got his PhD from Rutgers University and is currently a professor at Stockton University in New Jersey. So he went from police to professor. Please welcome Dr. Nusret Sahin. Nusret, how are we doing?
I'm doing fine, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're here specifically to talk about obviously a research project because that's what this series is about, but you had a project called EPJETS, which is Enhancing Procedural Justness of Encounters Through Substantiation. That's a mouthful.
Yes, that is. Yes, it is.
Before we get into, just talk about how did that name come about before we dive into what the project is?
Yeah, I should tell you that it took some time for me to come up with that name. I wanted procedural justice to be in this name, and I tried, and this is the best that I came up with. But I believe I thought that people might find it attractive because there's jets inside it, so it's more memorable, and that's why we came up with this name.
Yeah. So you got the acronym, you got the EPJETS. So that's really the most important part in law enforcement because everybody has that special name. So kudos for getting jets in the name. Okay, so let's go into a brief overview of the project and just to give our listeners an understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, the EPJETS came out of a growing need to rebuild the relationship between law enforcement and the communities. As after the George Floyd incident, that incident sparked nationwide protests, and that really undermined public trust in the police. And we felt that we had to do something to repair the damage, especially around how people experience interactions with the officers, because, we had recently high-profile police-citizen interactions, and they didn't end up well, unfortunately. So we tried to come up with a strategy for police departments so that they can implement this. And we thought that there should be different community policing efforts other than coffee with a cup or pizza with a cup. I really value those initiatives, but I think we need to focus on more day-to-day interactions. So we chose traffic stops because 84% of all police-initiated interactions in the U.S. is taking place during traffic stops. And police departments can take advantage of this and maybe approach the citizens and explain them what they do and why they do these traffic stops. So our goal was to introduce a new communication strategy, which not only helps to de-escalate tense situations, but also builds public trust. And we created a multi-layered approach grounded in procedural justice. And, our listeners may or may not know procedural justice, but, on its basis, procedural justice is treating people with fairness, being respectful, and giving them a voice. So we included procedural justice in this protocol. And we also included data transparency. As we know, now, body-worn camera footage is available to the agencies. Agencies are recording their interactions with the citizens. And we thought that why don't we share that with the citizens so that they can see and reflect on their behavior, or if they see that something is not right, they can report it to the police department. And in addition to that, we also incorporated data analysis. And I think your listeners might be interested in especially this part because this is something that they can easily utilize and use. We analyzed traffic crash data by using SIMSY's RTM DX software And we listed like high risk places of traffic crashes. And we also came up with crash maps to see where we should prioritize traffic enforcement. So those are the main elements of project.
So in terms of the actual project, I know that you used a random control trial. Can you explain to the listeners a little bit about the random control trial aspect of this and your experimental versus your control group?
Yeah, as Jamie, randomized control trials are considered as the gold standard in research. So in randomized control trials, in the way that we did it, you have two groups. So we worked with two agencies, Atlantic City and Pleasantville Police Departments, and they conducted 1,423 stops over 20 months. And we randomized each stop to either the experimental condition or the control condition. The drivers who were assigned, and of course they weren't aware that they were assigned to the control group. Drivers assigned to the control group received the business as usual treatment, which is, you were speeding. Can I get your driver's license and insurance card? Here's your ticket. You're good to go. But in our protocol, in the experimental people who received the experimental condition, officers had to follow the script that we developed, again, with the officers. So this script included where the traffic crashes are, how many traffic crashes happened in that city in the past year, and also elements of empathy, just telling them that officers would have a hard time if they had to call one of the friends or family of the person who was engaged in a crash. And also we included elements of procedural justice, and they handed drivers the maps of traffic crashes. And for the first time, maybe ever, they gave them an access code for their footage. So during this interaction, if you are in the experimental condition, you would be given an access code, and you can go to our website, and within 4 to 7 days following the stop, you can view your footage. So that's basically what we did in the experimental condition. But I think you would also wanted to know how we randomize drivers, right, Jamie?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we had like small index cards, and these cards were shuffled before each stop. And we had colored cards or we had white cards. So we shuffle these cards, and each time officer is about to stop someone, he draws a card from a stack of cards. And if it's white, that means that it's going to be business as usual. He's going to keep it short, no script, no access to body worn camera footage, no data, the traffic stop as we know it. And if it's the experimental condition, again, they grab a clipboard, because we had these brochures inside that clipboard showing where the traffic crashes are. And this is also educating public and raising awareness. So those would be inside the clipboard. Also, the codes for access codes would be in the clipboard, so they would show it to their body cam so that we can associate the code with the stop. And also, they would follow the script. The script was also on the clipboard so that they can refer to the script. After a while, they memorize the script. But that's how we randomized people to either to the experimental or control condition.
Great. So in terms of the cards and the documentation piece, how did, each traffic stop that either received the control or the experimental condition get documented? Was that done in the CAD system? Was it done in some sort of other form or paperwork? What's the documentation process that was used ultimately in your analysis?
Yeah, of course, this was experimental. So it wasn't only one officer. We had a backup officer, and we were in that second car. And we did that on paper. So we kept track of like which stop was experimental, which stop was control. And if there's a diversion from the original protocol, we would have a short conversation with the officers asking them like what happened, because in the paper that we have, this was supposed to be an experimental condition or this was supposed to be a control condition. So we would have a short conversation with the officers, but we kept track of that on paper. We didn't use the CAD system.
So for the control group, then you still analyzed the body cam footage from those stops, correct?
Yes, we had access to that. But when we say we analyze it, like we just analyzed it just to make sure that officers did not follow the experimental protocol when they were supposed to follow the control condition, just to make sure that just for fidelity purposes, like it wasn't for like the actual analysis.
Okay. You went over on the colored card some of the things that were included in that the officers read, but I'm curious, how did that differ from the control group? Like some of the things, just kind of contrast what you saw in the control group, the things that they were saying versus what was included in the colored card.
Yeah, like as I said, in terms of like whether the officers implemented this properly, we did a natural language processing analysis just to ensure that the officers followed the condition that they were supposed to follow. But we also offered surveys to the drivers after each stop. So the officers would let them know that there are researchers in the backup car. So if you wanted to talk to them, they wanted to ask you a couple of questions about our stop today. And if they give us a go, then we would approach the driver and we would offer them a survey. We had the tablet computers so that they can take it right on the spot, or if they want to take the survey on paper, we had the paper surveys as well. And if they said like, I don't have the time, then we would give them a QR code so that they can take the survey later on. But we would know which one is the experimental survey and which one is the control survey. And we compared those two.
Okay. All right. And then the ones with the experimental group, they were the ones that got the access to the body cam footage. And talk a little bit about that, because there was some protocol that you wanted to follow with releasing the body cam footage.
Oh yeah, that's also very complicated because as you may know, like where the body cam footage is stored, the only way to share that footage is through email. You need to get the email of the person so that you can send him the link. But we developed a different approach. So we designed a website specifically for this purpose. We work with two different software developers. And we designed a system where we can keep track of the videos. Like once we get it through evidence.com, and that's, again, our listeners may know, that's Axon's website where they keep these footage. We would download it from there. And then we did the reductions because we also wanted to like blur the faces of the people who are not part of that stop. And also, after we complete the reduction process, we would add a statement at the beginning of the video that this video should not be shared on social media. And also we had a counter. You can view the video 5 times, but after 5 times, the link would expire. And again, that suggestion came from the officers. And then if we upload the video, and that video would be sent to the police supervisor. So a supervisor would watch the footage and see, okay, our privacy concerns were addressed. The statement is there. This is good to go. Then he would mark it as ready. And once he marks it as ready, then it would be shown to the driver. If he asked for further reductions, he would mark it so that the video would be sent back to us. We would do further reductions and send it back to the supervisor. And this process continues on. We get to the point that, okay, we're releasing this video. And in some cases, they had objections because if there's an evidence in that video, they didn't want to release it, but that's only a small percentage. So we developed a website for this purpose, and that's how we shared these footage.
So I'm really interested in this approach. Obviously, it's something that a lot of agencies have not thought necessarily to do, to release it to citizens. Did you get feedback from citizens after they watched the body camera footage? Did you have any surveying or interviewing that was done after that step was taken?
That's a great question, Jamie. Initially, that wasn't our plan. In our design, we didn't include any surveys after they watched the footage, but like midway, we said maybe we should add something like a feedback box or something like that so that they can give us some feedback. And we did that. Like, let's say that when we reached to like 700, 800 stops, we said I had a conversation with the developer. So we were able to add that extra box so that they would be able to leave us a feedback. And yes, we got feedback from people.
Did you find that feedback informed the overall like findings and analysis of the project as well? So as another data point?
Yeah, it might be, but as you can imagine, we only included a couple of questions. So our survey included more questions. We had over 30 questions in our survey that was given right after the stops, but like that feedback was really short, like an open-ended question. Do you wanted to give us a feedback or were you satisfied? And we see that like people were really satisfied with the treatment that they received and they found police professional.
You mentioned evidence, concerns about evidence. What about the other people that might be in the vehicle and in the body cam footage there?
Yeah, and again, we would blur the faces of the other people who was in the vehicle. Like we didn't want them to be shown in the video because we don't know who they are,
Hmm.
and only the driver would be seen. And also, like sometimes officers, like you may see like the driver's license on the video, so those were blurred, or the plate numbers would be blurred. So we were sensitive about it. And I can tell you that like the police was also, the police supervisors was also extra sensitive. So they would warn us if they would see that something was not blurred.
Okay. So then when you're crunching the numbers, what did the numbers tell you?
Our findings showed improved perceptions of the police. Especially, I was surprised by this because, the most recent research shows that the impact of the body cams are fading out. Like people used to believe that, yeah, it makes police more professional, and research evidence showed that that was the case, but the most recent studies are showing that that's not the case. But our study found that the people who received our protocol expressed like found police more professional because of the body cams. So the
Hmm.
professionalism levels went up, and also trust in the police went up, confidence in the police went up, cooperation with the police went up. This is something that agencies need, because we asked them a question about like whether you would cooperate with this officer, whether you would share information if you have that information with the officer. So that also went up, like compared to the control group, we have higher levels of cooperation expressed in the experimental group. So trust and confidence, cooperation, police professionalism, we see differences, significant differences between the experimental and control group.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I find really fascinating about this research is that it had two different elements of analysis in it. One that happened at the beginning of the project, informing areas of high traffic crashes, the maps that were produced that were provided as part of the experimental group and the procedural justice stops, and then ultimately the analytical process that was done on the backside to analyze the results of it. Can you talk a little bit about what tools you and your team use to conduct both types of those analysis for this project?
So, like, let's start from the beginning. Like, to analyze where the traffic crash hotspots are, we used ArcMap and SIMSY's RTMDX software. So the SIMSY's RTMDX software gives you a list of high risk places. So this is something officers can use in their narratives. And actually, like we saw that sometimes citizens are coming up with similar narratives. So when officers stop someone for speeding near a school, they would say that, oh, I know I need to slow down because there's a school here. So, but if they're not aware that there's something that increases the risk of traffic crashes at that location, let's say that there's a gas station maybe, and they should slow down because there's a lot of traffic around gas station. RTMDX software would actually identify these places so that officers can use them in their narratives. And also ArcMap gives you the traffic crash hotspots, especially in areas where you don't have stores or schools, but those are highways. And for some reason, people speed on those places more often than any other places, so that you can easily identify those places as well. So those were the two tools we used to identify traffic crash hotspots. And to analyze what we to compare the experimental and control group, like I use Stata as my statistical analysis tool. But if you have an access to R, SPSS, you could also use those software. You could easily get this done. And also, I think the Qualtrics surveying tool, I find it great because like it gives you flexibility. It generates QR codes so that you can give a survey. or you can use links. So as a surveying tool, we used Qualtrics.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the data challenges you had either in the initial development of the locations and or in the analysis that you conducted to get your finding?
Yeah, I think one of the data challenges is nowadays, I believe most of the agencies are using CAD systems, and you can easily pull up the data from the CAD system. But when we first started this research, their CAD system was not compatible with like traffic crashes. So they were using another system which wasn't that helpful because you wouldn't be able to get the GPS coordinates of the traffic crashes. So we tried to identify those locations with the addresses that we have. That was kind of challenging. But the second year, we updated the data, and that year the CAD system was compatible, so we were able to get the GPS coordinates. And I think that one of the major challenges is what system do you use? What are the capabilities of the system that you're using? What tools are available to you? And also whether this data is gathered or collected accurately, because we know that sometimes officers need to rush and they may not put the proper information to their CAD system. So you have to ensure that the data you have is actually accurate and proper and was put in properly. Maybe you may try to think about training officers on that, and because this is valuable, otherwise you may not be able to identify those locations.
Yeah, I can imagine the analysts who are listening to this podcast are nodding their head, understanding a lot of those data challenges that many of us have faced in doing work like this as well.
What was the officer's response in general? They went through the training and going through this program. What was some of the feedback you got from them?
Yeah, and that part wasn't easy too, because of what's taking place and overall the perceptions of the police. When you go to an agency or the officers and tell them that, look, we're going to act in a different way because there are public expectations. How about being more transparent and accountable? You may get a backlash. So you need to really communicate this message well. And I believe my background really helped me to get this through. And after we completed this study, and even again, midway, I was told by some officers that it liked the script a lot. So it's hard for me to go back to what I used to do. It makes my job much easier. The only concern that I have is I may not have the time. So I think the police leadership should think about maybe giving officers more time because they have to go from call to call. And Atlantic City has a dedicated traffic unit, but still they had to respond to calls when there's no one available. So we had those challenges as well. So but I believe that, and not all the people, you interact with ordinary people during traffic stops. So maybe law-abiding citizens during traffic stops. So why don't we give them more time so that they can understand the dynamics of policing? Maybe they're not going to be interacting with police again in the near future. Yeah, those were the things, the challenges we had. And the officers, again, liked the concept, but they should be given the tools. Someone has to run this analysis and tell them that, look, these are where most of the traffic crashes are. And when you save lives, you become happy. We had incidents when we concentrated on certain locations. They found pedestrians, they found kids out on the roads, but they weren't using the sidewalk or other places. So they had the risk of being run over by a car. And when they saw that, when they save lives, it's extra rewarding.
So I'm curious to know, as you think back to the project and think back about analyzing the footage, is there any part of the project that surprised you immensely?
Yeah, that part, as I said, the body cam footage and its impact, how drivers find police more professional when they are given access to the footage. That part was something that I wasn't expecting. And the impact is much greater than the other items. We also analyzed, and something else, one thing is that body worn camera and its impact, it's more impactful when you give access to footage. And the second part is we also used race as a moderator just to see how this protocol impacts different races. Of course, we saw that it impacts people from all across the races, but the impact was greater for Hispanics. So for some reason, the increase in their level of trust or satisfaction or confidence was much higher than any other race. So that also surprised me, and maybe we should do more research on that topic.
All right, so let's move on then, because we do want to talk a little bit about how this project applies to analysis, applies to our listeners, and just to get you some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I believe agencies who have an analyst should maybe run these analysis to see where they have to deploy the resources, and that's what they do for crime. But there's some quality of life issues sometimes we don't pay much attention to. So I think the crime analysts can run or use these tools for different things. Like, for instance, we did something for mental health related calls for service as well. And there were interesting findings, and it gives you an idea, like it tells you a story. And by using these tools, they can apply that to traffic crashes. And again, they may reduce the number of crashes in their jurisdiction, and they may present it to the police chief or police leadership, or they can apply these tools to different areas, like different quality of life issues. And again, data tells you the truth most of the time if it's collected in a proper way. We didn't have a crime analyst when I was a police officer, but I'm so glad that now we have these people in police departments so that they can give us an idea about what's taking place, where should we focus on to deal with certain issues.
So one of the things with conducting research in law enforcement agencies, especially as an analyst or bringing research to your department, research projects can be very challenging for agencies. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges you faced in actually doing research, and maybe if an analyst wants to do research like this, what would be a couple tips you would give them to doing it more successfully?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would start with building trust. Not we're now with this project, we try to build trust between the community and the police, but within the agency as well. Like, officers need to know why we need such a research, and if they trust you, I can tell you that they help you with their best abilities. And I'm amazed, and I would like to talk to all the officers and the leadership of Pleasantville and Atlantic City police departments, because they supported us. Conducting such a project wasn't easy, but first the key thing is, I believe, gaining their trust. So the analysts, I'm sure that they're working well with the officers, but maybe they need to communicate the need for the research. The other thing is using proper tools, because if you just rely on the CAD system and not going to the field and trying to see how that works, and again, you may not get the data that you wish to get. And also, I believe you will need resources. So you have to justify why, again, you need this type of research. And if you go and check, maybe talk with the officers or just go over the data you already have and present it to the people, whoever is going to fund you. Again, you have to justify it so that you can get funding, because these type of research cost money. But I can tell you that, I imagine most of the crime analysts have certain tools. It's mostly about getting the buy-in of the officers, getting the buy-in of the leadership, and also presenting it. And also, if there are any partners that they have, like any higher education institutions that they can partner with, or nonprofits, I would suggest contacting them, because those institutions may have resources or the tools that crime analysts may need. So again, they may partner with those institutions. That would be another suggestion.
I was just thinking, you probably could teach a class at an analyst conference on things to look for in body cam footage. I guess, because you had to go through all that detail, trying to look for stuff that might have some kind of implication to the case, or identifying information that you probably have a pretty keen eye on what the typical body cam can pick up.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for the kind words. I would be happy to teach a class on this, but I can tell you that those body cams, it's unbelievable. The data that they collect is unbelievable. You can even see when the body worn camera was turned on, when they started to go after the car, and where they pulled it over, how long does it take. You have the time, you have the GPS, you have everything you need. So I think it's a great resource. And also, like, now there are more advanced technologies that can, Trulio is one of them, that can go over what officers said. And if there are any red flags, they can identify those red flags, and maybe they may have wanted to have a conversation with the officer about like how he interacts with people. And sometimes it's not just it might be a false positive, because certain neighborhoods you may talk differently, but again, like, the tools are just right there. If you utilize them, I believe we can improve policing, we can make it better, and we can serve the public in a better way.
What I think is really interesting about the tool set that you're talking about is, in your case, you use natural language processing as part of the review of body cams. But even all three of the primary vendors for body cams today have a version of AI that does do the identification that you're talking about, where it's specific language, it might be a particular object in the video, all of those things that can be leveraged. And then again, as we're talking about procedural justice, you also have the ability to have whether a stop is procedurally just from a language perspective, if it is or it isn't, and how that may fit into an early warning system as well, which is another series of data points to essentially bring to the top of the agency officers that might be at a tipping point for a specific event or a future complaint. But there's a lot of tools in this space with body cams that certainly all three of the major vendors have leveraged and can continue to leverage, which I think is really important for analysts as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know like what percent of the analysts are, looking into that data or utilizing the tools that we mentioned, but that's something that they can look. And again, that you can identify certain officers and just prevent more serious issues that may take place in the future. Like, as you said, like, this is like an early warning system.
Man, just another data set that an analyst has at their disposal. It amazes me when I think back of when I started as an analyst over 20 years ago. It's cliche, but it was a lot simpler. It was simpler times back then. It was like CAD data, it was crime data, it was interviews. Now, geez, I always say that analysts could spend their whole entire day analyzing social media. And now we have cameras and we have body cameras, and it just seems like more and more data is at the disposal of analysts to, again, wear many hats for the department and analyze data.
And the importance of leveraging these tools to do it efficiently and effectively, right? Body cam is one of those areas where you can get into it and review a lot of hours of footage, but being able to leverage some of the AI tools to be able to extract out what you need is really incredibly valuable today as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty valuable. And just if we can think of like how this can save agencies money, time, and like, because you would be able to identify some of the issues that you have. And that will save you a lot of time, and you will be able to help officers or improve your policing practices, and that will have an impact on our quality of life as a society.
All right, so what's next for you and this project?
Yeah, we're just presenting this at national conferences, and we are hoping to publish something out of this soon so that people can go and see specifically what we used, what tools we used, what our script looks like. So like the next step is just letting people know about an improved way of interacting with public, especially during traffic stops. But that doesn't mean that this protocol is just for traffic stops. It can be used in any type of interaction. You just need to have the data evidence. Like if you're going to a neighborhood that is having a lot of crime issues, and if you have the crime data, and if you can show them, look, this is a crime hotspot, that's why I'm here, I think they would welcome you rather than seeing you as someone who wasn't supposed to be there. So I think that would help us. That would make officers' job much easier.
All right. And what are some of the upcoming conferences you're presenting?
Yeah, I will be presenting in American Society of Evidence-Based Policing conference in Tucson, Arizona. So that's one of the conferences that I will be presenting, and that's at the end of this month. It's starting on April 30th. And I'm also presenting at American Society of Criminology Conference in DC in November. So if any of our listeners are attending one of those conferences, I would be happy to talk more about research and how we did it and how they can implement this. And we also got international attention. So people from Canada and Netherlands are reached out to us to find more about this project and how it was implemented. So I think we're going to disseminate the findings and help other people to implement this in the field if they wish to.
Yeah, I hope you actually make it to IACP conference this fall. That would be definitely, I'm sure, a lot of chiefs need to hear that or would find benefit in your speech and in your presentation. This is really great. If one of our listeners wants to contact you and has specific questions, how can they contact you?
Yeah, they can reach out to us. Like we have a website first, like they can find more about this research on our website, epjets.org, EPJETS.org. So that's our website. And if they wanted to call us, our office number is 609-626-3092. And if they wanted to send us an email, our project email is epjets@stockton.edu. So they can contact us through email or they can call us from our office.
All right, very good. This is really great. Thank you so much, Nusret, for your time and this project. I really hope that we see more implementation, police departments across this country on this. And Jamie, do you have any other thoughts?
Just thank you so much for being our first guest on Research Remix. So we really are glad to have you and your insights related to this project for Analyst as well.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to your listeners. This is a great podcast. So I'm wishing you success.
All right. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, we will have links for additional information in the show notes. All the information, contact information, we will also include. Thank you both so much. Appreciate the insight and questions and conversation today. Until next time, both of you, take care and be safe.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you so much, Jason and Jamie. This was great. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.